Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
And so am I.
No, you're not.
I'm Matthew. How is everybody?
It's good to see you.
It's good to see you again. We saw each other most recently.
Yes, we did. We went to the Vancouver Art Gallery, which you call...
The Vag.
We went to the Vag. Oh, no.
We saw Rhea Pell and Emily Carr.
Emily Carr, yeah. The Rhea Pell was very eye-opening for me. I liked how we got to walk through this person's art history and all that kind of thing.
From the 40s through to 1992.
Right from his childhood, essentially.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's move on to something else. We're going to be dealing with an artist of a different kind, a con artist.
That was a good segue, Michael.
I try.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
In this episode, we look at the life and crimes of Brigitte Denise Cleroux, examining how she repeatedly evaded regulatory scrutiny, the suffering she inflicted, and the systemic failures that enabled her persistence for so long. This story is a chilling tale of deception, exploitation, and the profound breach of trust within Canada's healthcare system. Claru masqueraded as a nurse for years in multiple provinces, British Columbia, Ontario, Alberta, and Quebec. She treated hundreds of patients, administering drugs, and even performing medical procedures, all without a single legitimate credential. Her actions left a trail of traumatized patients, betrayed colleagues, and a health system forced to reckon with the vulnerabilities she so ruthlessly exploited. This is Dark Poutine episode 368. Playing Nurse, The Life and Crimes of Brigitte Cleroux. I've mentioned briefly on the show that I loathe hospitals and everything medical. Going to the doctor or even the dentist is frightening for me. Ever since I can remember, hospitals have made my skin crawl, and it all began with an attempted blood draw, one that didn't go as smoothly as it should have. I remember being small, pinned down by unfamiliar hands, feeling the sting of the needle miss its mark again and again. The sharp pain was bad enough, but it was the fear, the loss of control, that really stuck. I didn't understand what was happening, I just knew it hurt. I was afraid, and no one seemed to be listening to me. Not long after came my tonsillectomy. I can still recall the hospital gown barely covering my little body, the blinding lights above, and the overwhelming sense of being alone in a place that didn't feel safe. The anesthesia mask held by another masked figure hovered over my face like something out of a nightmare, and though they said I'd go to sleep, the smell and taste of the gas paired with the sensation of slipping away was terrifying. Waking up groggy, sore, sick, and surrounded by sterile walls only cemented the trauma. I went through it again when I had tubes put in my ears after numerous ear infections. To this day, those early experiences linger. Needles make me tense, and the antiseptic smell of a hospital can bring it all rushing back. Even simple medical procedures feel loaded, heavy with the echoes of that little boy who didn't understand why he had to hurt.
Oh, squish, squish.
Yeah.
My brother was kind of like you. Hospitals freaked him out. Needles freaked him out. For me, luckily, I say luckily because over my life I've been in hospitals a number of times.
Yeah.
None of that ever bothered me. I always saw hospitals as a place to get fixed or to get better. And I'm the type of person, they're taking the blood, I'm like, cool. Or like hooking up to a machine, I'm like, what does that do? What does that number mean? They don't bother me at all.
Well, I'm immediately regretting doing this podcast about something medical because I'm starting to feel tight in my chest already. Like seriously, hospitals make me feel panic.
You're funny.
Oh, well, if I go quiet, it just means I've passed out. Anyway, all that said, the people in my nightmares are actual medical professionals. I can't imagine what it must be like to live with the aftermath of being violated by a creature like Brigitte Denise Cleroux. Brigitte Cleroux moved from province to province, Quebec, Alberta, Ontario, and BC for decades. She slipped through regulatory cracks and donned a nurse's uniform despite never having earned a legitimate nursing credential. Under more than 20 aliases, she infiltrated hospitals and clinics, administered drugs, performed procedures, and cared for vulnerable patients, all while hiding a staggering criminal record. As one patient's lawsuit starkly put it, Claru's actions caused, quote, unnecessary and excruciating levels of discomfort and pain, end quote, and left victims with lasting psychological scars, including post-traumatic stress, depression, and a profound distrust of the healthcare system. Claru's troubled beginnings in Ottawa foreshadowed a life of fraud and manipulation. According to court records and reporting by CBC, she began committing theft as a youth and quickly escalated to more serious offenses. Her criminal record is staggering. 67 adult convictions in Canada and the U.S., including multiple convictions for impersonation and fraud in Quebec and Alberta, and her first adult conviction dating back to 1988. Her methods were brazen and effective. Claru secured positions at reputable institutions in BC using forged documents and stolen identities, working at Women's Hospital in Vancouver and the View Royal Surgical Centre in Victoria and other clinics. She used different names and credentials in Alberta and Quebec to gain employment as a nurse and even as a teacher. In one particularly harrowing account, a patient described how Claru, after several failed attempts to insert an IV, quote, handled the plaintiff in an aggressive manner, using her knees and body weight to hold her down, causing the plaintiff to fear for her safety, end quote. The patient was left with a nicked artery and a warning from hospital staff to seek an HIV test, as Claru herself had been pricked by a needle during the struggle. The impact of Claru's deception has been devastating. Victims have described excruciating pain, lasting nerve damage, and emotional trauma. One woman recalled Claru making, quote, numerous damaging and disparaging comments about her fertility, leading her to delay critical medical decisions. The lawsuits filed against Claru and the institutions that employed her allege battery, privacy violations, and gross negligence, leaving a deep sense of betrayal felt by patients who believed they were in the hands of a trusted professional.
Mike, you think that if someone went to the trouble of faking an identity to get a job as a nurse, they'd do it because they felt the need to look after people or to care for people, which obviously she didn't, which begs the question for me. If I was to fake credentials for a job, I'd do one where I actually made loads of money, like a banker or a trader. Like, why a nurse? You know, you could get a lot richer faking other professions.
I'm an investment banker.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah. Oh, dear. Brigitte Denise Cleroux's criminal journey began early, with her first known offenses dating back to the late 80s in Gatineau, Quebec. According to CBC reports, Claru was first charged with impersonation and forgery in 1991 at 19 years old. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to a month in prison. This initial brush with the law set the tone for a lifetime of deception. A family friend recalled, quote, "She has had a problem with fraud ever since she was young," end quote. Even as a teenager, Claru was already engaging in theft and fraud, a pattern that would only escalate over the years. After her first jail sentence in Quebec, Claru headed south to the United States, where her criminal activity continued. She studied nursing in Colorado, but never completed her training, probably learning just enough to be dangerous. Later, she worked in the beauty industry and as a restaurant manager, yet, as one Crown prosecutor put it, Claru, quote, "chose instead to fraudulently obtain work as a nurse because it paid more," end quote. She began impersonating nurses in the United States and forged various credentials. She had outstanding warrants in the U.S. for fraud, theft, using a false ID, and forgery. In Colorado, she allegedly used fake credentials to work as a registered nurse in Colorado Springs in 2001. In Florida, she was accused of stealing a wallet and forging OxyContin prescriptions using a stolen prescription pad. Florida police described having to force their way into her home and arrest her after she locked herself in a closet in an attempt to evade capture. Claru's methods became more refined as she moved home to Canada, traveling from province to province. She used a variety of aliases, including Bridget Merrier, Bridget Fournier, Bridget Claremont, Melanie Claru, Melanie Gauthier, Melanie Thompson, and Melanie Smith. Sometimes she used the names of acquaintances, exploiting personal relationships to obtain real identification documents. She used a false name to create an Alberta identification card in one instance. Then she forged a nurse's permit, which was convincing enough to secure her a job at Calgary's Properties Medical Clinic in 2008. Her colleague at the medical clinic became suspicious after only 2 months, and she was laid off when facial recognition software flagged her ID. She was charged with defrauding Service Alberta and forging a nurse's permit, having assumed the identity of her friend Joelle Ferrand Fournier.
Yeah, there's something really uncanny about it. It's like Dostoevsky's The Double. Mm-hmm. It's not just that she stole a friend's name. She kind of, like, doing that. She's stepping into her life and distorting who this actual woman is and walking around like right. in a second skin. Mm-hmm. And to have someone impersonate you, isn't just fraud. It's kind of obliteration in a weird way, right? Yeah. It's this psychic dread of being replaced badly while the world believes the imposter is you. It's terrible.
Yeah, it does. It damages your reputation, even if you say it wasn't me. It's like, well,
and just emotionally and psychically, right? It's just like, gross, right?
Yep. Bridget's criminal record grew as she manipulated hiring processes and regulatory systems. In Alberta, she was charged with impersonating a nurse at 2 medical clinics in 2007 and 2008, and even pretended to be a biology teacher at a French school in 2009, all while running a hair salon. Quote, "She was very, very good at what she did. She was an absolute master of manipulation and deception," said Bruce Peters, a former landlord who was also defrauded by Claru. Her ability to forge documents and present herself convincingly allowed her to repeatedly gain access to positions of trust. Despite multiple arrests and convictions, Claru was adept at evading long-term consequences. When she failed to appear for a court date in Alberta, a warrant was issued for her arrest, and the College and Association of Registered Nurses of Alberta issued a public safety alert in July 2010, warning that she had engaged in acts, quote, "considered dangerous," end quote, including administering injections. She was arrested in Ontario and sent back to Alberta, where she admitted to forging documents, including references. The consequences were minimal. Brigitte Cleroux arrived in British Columbia in June 2020 using the stolen identity and registration number of a real nurse, Melanie Smith. Claru secured a position at BC Women's Hospital in Vancouver. There, she presented a forged resume and references, and her application was convincing enough to bypass background checks and land her a job in the post-anesthetic care unit. This role will give her direct access to some of the province's most vulnerable patients. According to court documents, Claru cared for at least 899 patients at BC Women's Hospital and 56 more at Victoria's View Royal Surgical Centre, a private facility specializing in day surgeries.
This is brutal. So we background check babysitters more thoroughly than this, right?
Yeah, it's true. Boy Scout leaders.
Yeah, and in a post-anesthesia unit, a bad hire isn't just a little liability. That's a live wire. Patients can't advocate for themselves when they're sedated, right?
No.
So that's when the system is supposed to advocate for them because you're out of it, right?
Completely.
And it didn't. And they had this insane person doing stuff to them. It's terrible.
Yeah, I don't know about insane.
Well, I mean insane in a gross sense as opposed to a medical sense. I'm not pretending I'm a psychiatric nurse and I know the difference here.
Definitely not legally insane.
No, just, gross.
The Provincial Health Services Authority later admitted in court filings that Claru had defrauded them when applying for employment at BC Women's, and that she was never an actual employee, even though she worked at the hospital for over a year. During her tenure, she also worked at a dental clinic in Surrey, further expanding her reach and the number of patients exposed to her fraudulent care. Daily life as a nurse saw Claru performing a wide range of duties for which she was wholly unqualified. She administered powerful drugs, including fentanyl and hydromorphone, inserted IV lines, as we mentioned, and provided post-surgical care to women recovering from gynecological procedures.
Yeah, and this is where it stops being a con and starts becoming assault, right? Administering stuff like fentanyl, inserting IV lines without qualifications. Mm-hmm. That's a breach of bodily autonomy, right?
100%, yeah.
Medicine, even at its best, is already a high wire act, even in the hands of trained professionals. So now imagine that delicate balance in the hands of a fraud with no safety net, no license, no right to be there. Mm-hmm. That's not just risky, it's a roulette wheel loaded with their real lives.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Complaints and red flags began to surface during Claru's time at BC Women's Hospital. Colleagues described her as, quote, insensitive to her surroundings and, quote, disrespectful to patients and coworkers. She was disciplined multiple times for inappropriate behavior, placed on administrative leave in October 2020, and suspended without pay in December of that year. Yet she remained fraudulently employed until her termination in June 2021. The Provincial Health Services Authority's response to a class action lawsuit detailed several problematic incidents, including poor nursing skills, unprofessional conduct, and mounting patient complaints. Despite these red flags, Claru's deception persisted for over a year, exposing nearly 1,000 patients to unqualified care.
Yeah, one of the most dangerous assumptions in institutional life is that someone else has already checked.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And it's this kind of blind trust in, quote, the system that lets people like Claru not just slip through, but thrive in an organization like this, right? And just do what she wants. This seems to me like a textbook case of diffusion of responsibility, where everyone else assumed that someone else would raise the alarm.
I've worked in places where just those things have happened. Well, didn't that person check on that? Well, no, apparently not.
Oopsie daisy.
Oops. The impact on patients was profound. Many experienced physical harm, including nerve damage, pain, and complications from improperly administered drugs and procedures. The emotional toll was equally severe, with victims reporting anxiety, insomnia, and a deep sense of betrayal. The consequences of Claru's fraud extended beyond her direct victims. The real nurse whose identity she stole, Melanie Smith, suffered significant personal and professional harm. According to court documents, quote, the impact on Ms. Smith was significant, end quote, as she was forced to deal with the fallout of having her name and registration number associated with Claru's crimes. Smith's reputation was damaged, and she endured considerable stress and anxiety as she worked to clear her name and reassure her patients and colleagues of her legitimacy and competence. Brigitte Cleroux's criminal exploits in Ontario were no less audacious or damaging than those in BC. In the summer of 2021, she was hired at an Ottawa fertility clinic after presenting a forged resume with a fake diploma from the University of Miami and a British Columbia identity card under one of her known aliases, Melanie Smith. Her deception was convincing enough to fool the clinic's lead doctor and nurse, who brought her on as a registered nurse. Once again, Claru was given access to vulnerable patients undergoing sensitive and often emotionally charged medical procedures. Claru's downfall in Ottawa came thanks to the vigilance of a real nurse at the fertility clinic. Disturbed by Claru's unprofessional conduct and the distress she caused patients, the nurse conducted a routine online search and quickly discovered an alert about Claru's history of impersonation and fraud. When confronted, Claru quit abruptly, shoving a patient's chart into the doctor's arms and declaring, "I'm done. Do not call me." End quote. But her fraudulent career didn't end there. Just 5 days later, she secured a job at an Ottawa dental surgery clinic where she treated at least 12 more patients, including a child. When she was arrested in August 2021, she was still wearing a nurse's uniform. More after a quick break. And we are back. Matthew, thoughts?
Kind of timely. I'm thinking of this episode through a more personal lens here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with my recent cancer diagnosis and treatment.
Which is kind of why I thought it would be relevant to you.
Yeah. So with my recent cancer diagnosis and treatment, you know, it really brings the story home. So I was thinking about this, and it's like when you're sick, right? Kind of like your whole body becomes porous. It's like every part of you is open to someone else's expertise, their hands, their judgment, their care. In a way, you kind of become like public property,
yep.
Right? Shared between specialists and surgeons and nurses. You know, your body's like their property for a while in a way because they're doing what they have to do.
A friend of mine is in the hospital right now and they're undergoing some surgery, and it's a university hospital. And so they said, well, sure, we can have student doctors look in on things. But what they weren't aware of was that the student doctors were going to come and watch the prepping for the procedures and all that kind of stuff. And it's very strange to have yourself sitting there feeling like you're their science project in a way, as you're being talked about as if you're not in the room. Very, very strange.
You know, with that feeling of you being public property, I think when someone like Claru slips into the system, right, with fake documents and faked empathy is really quite nauseating, like when I think about it, because what happens to you as a person who's trying to heal when the person caring for you is a lie. And, you know, and I loathe the medical system here, the bureaucracy, but the vast majority of the people who looked after me were seriously top notch. Right? They're really good people. So when I diss the system, it's the system, not the people in the system. Like my surgeon, my surgical team were great. And I had so much trust in them. And it wasn't misplaced. They were really good. And just to think of somebody slipping into a profession like this that doesn't belong there, it's just horrifying.
Yeah, it's really, really scary. The legal response to Claru's crimes in Ontario was swift and severe. In April 2022, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison after pleading guilty to criminal negligence causing bodily harm, assault with a weapon, impersonation, and using forged documents. Ottawa Crown Attorney Moise Karimji described Claru as a career criminal who had, quote, made a career out of deception for decades. During sentencing, Claru wept and apologized to her victims, saying, quote, "I'm truly sorry, I didn't mean to hurt anybody." The judge, however, was unmoved by her tears, and the Crown sought a sentence of up to 10 years to reflect the seriousness and persistence of her offenses. Claru's Ontario sentence was ordered to run concurrently with her later BC sentence, but the aggregate length of her prison time was extended by 4 years following her conviction in BC. The cases in Ottawa and British Columbia together exposed deep flaws in hiring and credential verification processes across Canadian healthcare and left a legacy of trauma for the patients and professionals caught in Claru's web of lies. The nature of Cleroux's offenses in Ottawa was particularly egregious. She pleaded guilty to assault with a weapon, a needle, criminal negligence causing bodily harm, and fraud and impersonation. According to the agreed statement of facts, Claru did not know how to give injections, draw blood, or administer fentanyl because she was not a nurse. Her lack of skill and aggressive behavior left patients bleeding with loss of sensation for weeks, and in some cases sobbing uncontrollably after being subjected to her care. One patient described Claru as, quote, abrasive and aggressive, while another said her actions left them in tears. The emotional and physical harm she inflicted was compounded by the realization that their trust had been so thoroughly violated. Claru's sentencing in British Columbia reflected the gravity of her offenses. In December 2024, Claru was sentenced in the BC Supreme Court on 11 criminal counts, including fraud, impersonation, assault, and using forged documents. Associate Chief Justice Heather Holmes described Claru as, quote, a serial imposter, and the case as, quote, highly unusual, noting that Claru's, quote, deep-seated dishonesty had caused emotional distress to hundreds of patients. The sentence handed down was severe, 4 additional years in prison to be served consecutively to the 7-year sentence Claru was already serving in Ontario for similar crimes, bringing her total incarceration to 7 years for the BC offenses. Holmes meticulously detailed Claru's use of, quote, numerous fake documents to get the jobs in healthcare facilities, providing false references and email addresses that were under her control. The judge emphasized that the, quote, common ground among the victims was their lack of consent to be injected or treated by an unqualified person, and that some had undergone, quote, the most invasive of procedures on the most private area of their bodies, end quote.
Yeah, and consent is the cornerstone of ethical medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Without it, everything becomes a violation, even if it's intended for good. If you don't give consent, nobody should be able to do anything with your body, right?
Well, I mean, there are always examples where you cannot give consent and a medical professional has to provide care. Like you're injured in a car accident and unconscious and bleeding to death.
Yes, but that's also when, you know, later on relatives come in and give consent, like your spouse gives consent if you're still out of it, right?
Yeah.
But my point is consent is the cornerstone of ethical medicine.
It is, to somebody who's conscious and able to make a decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, if you study medicine, like consent is hugely important, right? Mm-hmm. And even to the point of, hey, here's my signed card. If I have an accident, don't treat me. Right. So they even have systems to go, there's a non-resuscitation consent.
My dad had a DNR.
Right.
Do not
right.
resuscitate.
So that's the importance of consent. Mm-hmm. And, you know, what's chilling here is that the breach wasn't procedural. Like people gave informed consent under false pretenses. Right. Right. And that's not a gray area. It's kind of like medical gaslighting, right? Administering someone sort of in a stolen medical mask in a way. It's
very weird.
It's horrible.
I can't I've been trying to wrap my brain around this person's motivations. Just, you know, short of money, it's probably control and wanting to just control situations and being sadistic.
No idea. But I just look at these photos I just wouldn't trust. She just said she doesn't even look trustworthy.
No. She can't even put her eyelashes on right.
Those eyelashes are terrible.
Anyway.
She sure couldn't fake being an esthetician, I'll tell you that.
No, definitely. And that's what she took. She studied that. She ran a hair salon.
And her eyebrows are terrible. They're on crooked.
Shitty.
You're right.
Yeah. In the courtroom, victim impact statements described the lasting trauma. Quote, my life will never be the same since this criminal touched me, said one woman. Another, choking back tears, said her consent to receive medical treatment was violated and she had to go on a waiting list for a new physician as a result. In another victim impact statement, one woman declared, quote, I had an expectation of professional care. Instead, I experienced a physical assault, end quote. The court also heard from a psychologist who assessed Claru. The expert could not give a precise reason for her serial offending, but found she had a, quote, profound lack of insight and, quote, numerous traits of antisocial, narcissistic, and histrionic personality disorders, end quote. Holmes noted that Claru's prospects for rehabilitation, quote, seem slim, and that her criminal record spanning more than 65 convictions for fraud, forgery, and impersonation spoke to a pattern of persistent deceit. The judge's remarks underscored the gravity of Claru's actions. Quote, Claru, 52, has never been professionally qualified as a nurse, and her criminal record includes numerous convictions for fraud and forgery over the years in several provinces and in the United States, end quote.
Yeah, and back to your point about why is she doing it, it's not about ambition or money. At this point, it's becoming a pathology for her in a way, right? Mm-hmm. This is a pattern of compulsive behavior.
This is something she will do again.
Like it seems like she's not lying to survive, but she's surviving to lie.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's what gets her off.
Mm-hmm.
And, when somebody builds an entire identity like this on deception, how do you even begin a project of rehabilitation, right, for this person?
Because they're full of shit.
Yeah, like this is deeply full of shit, right? Like, I know people are full of shit. This is deeply full of shit.
Yeah, like completely full, like so much shit that your eyeballs are floating.
Spilling over.
Yeah. Maclean's magazine reported, quote, for 30 years, Claru had been crisscrossing the country in a game of identity-shifting catch me if you can, slipping through the cracks of provincial regulatory bodies and leaving behind a long rap sheet, frustrated victims, and falsified documents that consistently fooled employers. Her forgeries were sophisticated enough to land her jobs in healthcare settings, even as her criminal record grew. The BC cases exposed the vulnerabilities in Canada's healthcare hiring and credentialing systems. Despite multiple complaints, disciplinary actions, and mounting evidence of fraud, Claru was able to continue practicing for over a year, inflicting harm on hundreds of patients and leaving a legacy of trauma and mistrust in her wake. Her crimes in BC, like those in other provinces, forced a reckoning with the healthcare system and highlighted the urgent need for stronger safeguards to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Claru's repeated use of forged documents and stolen identities exposed serious vulnerabilities in hiring practices and regulatory oversight. As one nurse who helped expose her in Ottawa put it, quote, it honestly came down to bedside manner. There was a lack of professional behavior, personality characteristics that you think of as a nurse, they weren't really there with her, end quote. This lack of authenticity, combined with mounting complaints, eventually led to her being unmasked, but not before she'd caused significant harm to patients and colleagues alike.
Yeah, and that line says so much because beyond the credentials and the technical skills, there's an emotional architecture in nursing, I'm going to call it, right? Empathy, patience, presence, right?
Nurses are, classically known for that.
They're a type, right? And it's not something you can fake for long, right?
No.
So this woman, she could forge documents, but she couldn't forge decency, right? And people saw through that. And eventually that facade was always going to crack when the human part was supposed to be there, right?
Note to anybody who's judging your nurse, maybe look at their makeup.
Look at their eyelashes.
I'm back on the eyelashes thing. In British Columbia, court records reveal that BC Women's Hospital accepted a photocopy of a personal check altered with whiteout and a handwritten name as her only identification. No government-issued ID was required. Quote, they accepted a photocopy of a personal check from Claru where she had whited out her name at the top of the check and handwritten the name Melanie Smith as confirmation of her identity as Melanie Smith. No one at the Provincial Health Services Authority, PHSA, verified her references or checked her credentials with the BC College of Nurses and Midwives, a step that could have quickly exposed her deception.
This is an OMG moment.
Yeah.
Right? So even when I apply for a job in marketing, I get my references checked.
Mm-hmm.
And my job is not sticking people with IVs and administering drugs, right?
Right.
I think what's annoying about this is there's so much bureaucracy in the healthcare system, a lot that can be cut through, but the piece of, quote, bureaucracy bureaucracy that's there for a very good reason isn't even being used.
It's true.
It's just like,
Not in this case.
Let's do the bureaucratic stuff that just slows us down and maybe isn't needed, but let's skip the stuff that's actually vitally important.
But note, we can't blanket say that they didn't check the references of every nurse working in.
Of course not, but here's
an example.
And every single one should be, right? Like, what is the reason for this person not being...
How did she slip through?
That's bad. That's a mistake or an oversight or something.
Right.
But the thing is, you can't just crap on the bureaucracy. Is people like this, like we already have a hard enough time with the healthcare system across the country. And then some dickhead like her comes in and just makes stuff even worse.
Exactly.
Right? Like this is on her as well, right?
It definitely is. I mean, people like me who are terrified of hospitals, this kind of story doesn't help. But, at the same time, intellectually, I suspect when I go to a hospital, all the people I'm dealing with are qualified to be there. It's a reasonable expectation. But of course, again, stories like this, next time I have to go, oh boy, I pity the fools who have to deal with me.
You're such a sensitive boy, Mike.
I really wish that wasn't the case sometimes, but it's true. Claru's pattern repeated across provinces. In Alberta, Claru's forged nurse's permit and stolen identity were convincing enough to secure her a job until facial recognition software finally flagged her ID as suspicious. In Ontario, the College of Nurses spokesperson explained that employers are expected to cross-reference potential hires with the college's Find a Nurse online directory and list of unregistered practitioners. These steps were evidently skipped or insufficiently followed in Claru's case. Health authorities have since acknowledged their failures. The PHSA issued a public statement, quote, "This individual has built a career on deception and impersonating licensed professionals. We are using this incident as an opportunity to strengthen system processes to the fullest extent possible." After Claru's deception at BC Women's Hospital came to light, the PHSA initiated an immediate quality and clinical review of all patient care she provided. This review identified that Claru had directly cared for 899 patients and had access to the records of another 258, prompting the PHSA to notify all 1,157 affected patients with disclosure letters beginning in late 2021. The PHSA stated, "PHSA has not in any way tried and is not now trying to evade or avoid responsibility," end quote, emphasizing its intent to address the incident transparently. Recognizing the systemic failures that allowed Claru to gain employment with forged documents and under a false identity, the PHSA overhauled its hiring and credential verification processes. According to an affidavit from the hospital's chief operating officer, Cheryl Davies, the PHSA now enforces, quote, "a standardized process to ensure all registered nurses hold a valid license upon being hired and during the duration of their employment," end quote. This includes mandatory cross-checking of every nurse's name and license number with the British Columbia College of Nurses and Midwives, BCCNM, at hiring and during annual audits, ensuring that credentials are current and legitimate. Davies further explained, quote, "Every check now involves confirming both name and license number with the BCCNM to verify credentials are current and licenses are up to date," end quote. The regulatory responses extends beyond BC. For example, in Ontario, the College of Nurses of Ontario requires all employers to cross-reference potential hires with its public registry and a list of unregistered practitioners, steps that, if followed rigorously, would have flagged Claru and her aliases. The BCCNM and other provincial regulators have also reiterated the necessity for employers to use their online directories to confirm the status of all nursing staff, aiming to prevent similar incidents in the future. The aftermath has seen a wave of lawsuits and public outrage. The class action suit filed against the PHSA alleges that the authority, quote, should have known Claru was using falsified documents and credentials, which could have been easily discovered if it had confirmed her information with the British Columbia College of Nurses and Midwives. Lead lawyer J. Scott Stanley stated, quote, I'm very confident that this lawsuit will demonstrate that Ms. Claru demonstrated an utter lack of competency that should have caused people to review this. To me, that's more concerning than her fraudulently defeating the barriers to acquire the employment. End quote. This class action lawsuit against the PHSA is ongoing and has not been fully resolved as of May 2025. The Supreme Court of BC certified the class action in July 2023 specifically on the issue of willful violation of privacy. In his ruling, Justice K. Michael Stevens noted, quote, the evidence before me suggests that Ms. Claru, who was an unlicensed nurse, nevertheless was permitted by the PHSA to work in a nursing role with patients in a private medical setting, reviewed medical records, and in a nursing role had physical contact with and personally observed putative class members in a clinical setting during their hospital stay for gynecological procedures, end quote. This ongoing litigation continues to pressure health authorities to strengthen oversight and accountability. Recent updates confirm that the class action is progressing, especially now that Claru's criminal sentencing is complete and victims are turning their attention to the civil suit. Multiple law firms continue to represent both class members and individuals with separate claims, and new lawsuits continue to be filed against BC health authorities as of May 2025. The long-term impact on patient trust is profound. One plaintiff's claim summed up the collective sense of betrayal. Quote, as a result of the collective negligence and wrong acts of the defendants, Claru, PHSA, and BCCNM, the plaintiff also experienced and continues to experience anxiety and a loss of trust in the healthcare system and healthcare professionals. End quote. The public outcry has forced health authorities to confront uncomfortable questions about their system's weaknesses and to commit to reforms, but for many, the damage to confidence in Canadian healthcare will not be quickly repaired. The human cost of Brigitte Cleroux's crimes is incalculable. Victims have come forward with stories of physical pain, emotional trauma, and a deep lingering fear of seeking medical care. One woman told the court that after being treated by Claru, she is now, quote, on anxiety medication, is always on high alert, and is angry and on edge, end quote. Another described how her consent was violated during a gynecological procedure, leading to a, quote, complete loss of trust in my doctor and the need to find a new physician. A third victim, a teacher, had to take time off work with depression and withdrawal from her family after Claru administered fentanyl to her 3 times. The lawsuits filed by victims detail a range of physical injuries and psychological suffering. Several women allege that Claru's incompetence left them in excruciating pain, exposed them to infection, or caused nerve damage that persists years later. Brigitte Cleroux's criminal legacy is a stark cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition, systemic complacency, and the fragility of trust in healthcare. Her decades-long spree of impersonation and fraud revealed how even the most basic safeguards, such as verifying credentials and references, can be overlooked with devastating consequences. Despite all the measures taken by hiring and regulatory bodies, victims and advocates have voiced frustration over how Claru operated undetected and the perceived lack of urgency in the institutional response. One victim told Global News, quote, I still don't understand how BC Women's allowed her to be there for that long and have so many complaints against her, and still allowed her to practice on people in a gynecology ward. Clearly, there's a crack in the system for this to happen this long. End quote.
Yeah, I mean, a crack in the system, this is more of a chasm than it is a crack, right?
Right.
The fact that no one clocked her until a nurse Googled her. So the fact that no one clocked her until a nurse Googled her. This is, I think, less about this woman being a cunning villain and more about institutional rot in some ways. Like she's some great mastermind. There's that Margaret Heffernan TED Talk, I don't know if you ever saw it, where she talks about willful blindness and how people look away because seeing would require them to act, right? It just feels like everyone looked away.
Interesting. Well, as lawyer J. Scott Stanley observed, quote, whenever someone presents as a professional, you have to provide proof of certification for licensure. You want to see verification documents so you know who they are. And the PHSA just never bothered to get that level of detail, end quote. The path to healing is long for the victims, but their resilience is evident in their pursuit of justice and their willingness to speak out. Their stories have forced a reckoning in British Columbia and across Canada as healthcare systems grapple with the urgent need to restore trust and protect patients from future imposters. Ultimately, the Brigitte Cleroux case is a warning and a call to action. It challenges every institution and individual involved in healthcare to ask hard questions about oversight, responsibility, and the actual cost of complacency. Only by learning from these failures can Canada hope to prevent another tragedy of this scale and begin to rebuild the trust that Brigitte Cleroux so profoundly shattered. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 368, Playing Nurse, The Life and Crimes of Brigitte Cleroux.
That's right, it's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
Alrighty, here is our first voicemail.
Hey, folks. Just wanted to get in touch. My name's Debbie. I'm calling from the Museum of Vancouver. A little while ago, you guys shared about the neons that you can come see at the museum. I just wanted to let you know that while our neon exhibition is no longer open, it ran for a really long time. It's not on now, but we do still have a lot of neons in the galleries, including the neon sign for the Smiling Buddha Cabaret and a bunch of others. So I'd love to have you guys come check that out, or any visitors who want to come check that out. And rumor has it there will be more neons coming soon. So stay tuned. That'll be out in the ether soon enough. Anyways, thank you so much. Love the show, and thanks for the plug. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Well, there you go. The Museum of Vancouver calling us up and saying hello. That's kind of nice.
So we did the art gallery last week. We should go to the mauve, the mauve as I call it.
Yes.
I like to move it. We should go together and check that out. There's lots of other stuff at the museum as well.
And when we go, let's shoot some video there of us being there and then release it.
Yeah, and there's a lot more than just the neon at
there's Museum of Vancouver is a great place. I love it. Yeah. I've been there numerous times, and I want to go back numerous times. So thank you, and we will definitely come and see some neon and other cool things that are there. And I'm looking forward to a new neon display.
I want our lights up in neon, mate.
Well, I have my neon Canadian thing behind me.
The Matthew and Michael show in neon. Knows how I put my name first.
Yes, I did.
It's only because it's alphabetical. Right.
It has nothing to do with your ego at all. All righty. Well, we know what she does for a living and where she lives, I guess, somewhere in the Lower Mainland. So I'm
gonna say she lives in Kitsilano.
I like
easy for her to get to work.
There you go.
Thanks for calling in, Debbie.
Thank you. And let's listen to another voicemail.
Hi, Mike. It's Brian calling. It's in reference to episode 364 and the lions at the Lionsgate Bridge. Many years ago, back actually in the mid to late 70s, I was living in Powell River, and my the neighbor next door, my dad, I believe at one time he was a construction worker on the Lionsgate Bridge back in the 1930s. And on the occasion when I would go over to visit my parents, and I'd chat with the gentleman, Woodward was his last name, I can't remember what his first name was. But anyway, we got to talking about different things, and one day he did mention something about the Lionsgate Bridge and a few stories about it, about, there's always somebody who's the first to cross the bridge before it's officially opened and so on and so forth. But he did mention about the two lions on the south end of the bridge. And apparently when they were being built, they flew a fellow over from Italy who was a specialist with, making these type of cement features. And they brought the fellow over and they put the forms in, and originally they used gelatin to hold the shape of the concrete within the form. And the lions are both made in two parts. And you're right, the head is a separate part that was put on after the bases had been formed and cured and ready for, mounting of the heads. Well, he did tell me too that, as a token of good luck at before they put the heads on the lions, is everybody reached in their pocket and they took out and they threw their change or pocket watch or whatever happened to be in their pockets, ended up inside the lions. So inside, I'm not sure if it's both of the lions or just one of the lions, there is a treasure trove of time capsule items that, perhaps one day when they do decide to lift the heads off these lions, they will be discovered. But anyway, I just thought it would be a little bit of trivial information, having the first-hand account with somebody who actually had very close contact with the construction of the bridge, who gave me a really good inside story on things. Anyways, have a good day. Thanks. Long-time listener, first-time caller. And Mike, go take a big giant shit in your hat. Thanks. Bye for now.
They're concerned about you, Matthew, obviously, if you're not the one having your shit in your hat. So yeah. I'm the one that's going to get the infection.
So you have to give him since you didn't mention me at all, you have to give him a name, a job, and where he lives.
Well, I think he's still living in Powell River. I
think he makes microphones for a living.
Sure, yeah.
Because he's obsessed with mics.
Mike.
That's really fun. Cool, though. I wonder if anyone threw a condom in the line or something.
Well, I'm concerned that people are going to go knock the heads off the lions now.
Do not knock the heads off the lions.
Dark Poutine does not endorse that.
I love those lions.
Every
time I drive past them, I'm like, hi, lions.
I've taken photos of them before, just because I think they're cool looking. So
did you name them Egg and Waffles?
No, I didn't name my cats Egg and Waffles. They came that way.
Well, from now on, we'll call it the one on the left is Egg, the one on the right is Waffles.
So there's a little story about the right and the left, and I think I've told it on the show before, but not since you've been here. My dad always referred to a certain part of his body as Bright and Lion. So Bright is right, Lion is left. So what part of a male's body dangles behind the twig? The berries. Anyway, so he would call his berries Bright and Lion. And the reason he would call his twig and his berries Bright and Lion was because oxen from ox teams are always called Bright and Lion. So Dad,
that's hilarious.
He was a veterinarian who did the drug testing for the World Ox Pull Championships, and he would always call his testicles Bright and Lion.
I never named my private bits.
No?
No.
Well, I may have, but I'll never tell. Okay. Moving forward. Bright and Lion is fine.
Anyway, thanks for calling, Brian. I really liked that story. That was great.
Me too. I really like that as well. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. And we do have a Donut Money donor this week, and it is Patricia Chong from Toronto, a.k.a. Tarana. And she says, Dear Dark Poutine, my wonderful friend, lol, that's her nickname, turned me on to this podcast as she has impeccable taste, and I've become a big fan of yours. Her birthday is in May. Oh, well, she's probably going to hear this in June.
Sorry.
And I was hoping you could wish her a happy Dark Poutine birthday. P.S. I did my undergraduate degree in history at U of T. Ooh la la, and I gotta say that I wished they covered a fraction of the fascinating Canadian history that you two do. Thank you for all your work and your dark humor. So thank you, Patricia. So she's got an undergrad in history from U of T. I wonder what she's done with that.
But happy birthday. What's her friend's name?
It just says her nickname is Wonderful Friend.
Okay, well, happy belated birthday, wonderful friend.
Happy birthday, wonderful friend.
We recorded this one a bit late.
Yeah.
So what does Patricia have an undergrad in?
History.
History.
But I wonder if she's even used it, because sometimes people don't use their degree. They just do something different. So. Oh, no, he's thinking.
I think she's an archivist.
Okay. Of what description? How and where?
You know, I'm picturing like really kind of like old occult books and stuff like that.
Okay.
She's like an archivist for all things witchy and cool and occult.
Esoteric things.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. I would actually like to do that job myself. Well, thank you, Patricia. And again, happy birthday, wonderful friend.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that is it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Paw de bad apple.
Paw de bad pomme. La mal pomme.
La mal pomme. Do not be a mal pomme.
I'm doing Duolingo again, so I'm
do a bien ouf.
What? Be a good egg. Okay.
We are okay. But somebody's going to have to call in and tell us how to say this in French.
I'm sure they will.
Okay, good.
Bye.